Davey Allison was part of a famous racing family. He died from injuries he got in a helicopter crash. He was only 32 years old and left behind his wife and 2 kids. This was another sad event for this well-known racing family. After staying quiet for 32 years, NASCAR officials and people who study plane crashes have now released secret documents about the helicopter crash that killed Davey Allison. This news shocked everyone in the racing world. Most people thought it was just a simple pilot mistake, but now it seems much more complicated. The new reports that were found include flight information, repair records, and private letters. These papers suggest the accident might have happened because of broken parts that nobody fixed and bad weather conditions that were quietly ignored back then. For many years, fans believed the official story that said a wrong move caused the crash at Talladega's infield. But the new proof shows something different. It talks about technical warnings, repair notes that were ignored, and statements from people who saw it happen that never made it into the final report. These new discoveries go against NASCAR's own history books and bring back old sad feelings in the racing community. The papers prove that several mechanical problems had been reported weeks before the crash happened. This included issues with the helicopter's tail rotor connection system and the torque control. In one part, the investigators wrote that the tail rotor power was weak and that losing control of direction was possible when under pressure. It was a warning that now sounds like it predicted the future. Davey Allison's death wasn't just another sad story in a dangerous sport. It was a mystery hidden by paperwork and rules. And for the first time ever, NASCAR has admitted what many people suspected for a long time. This wasn't a simple case of the pilot making a mistake. It was a series of broken parts, weather problems, and human choices all coming together at the worst possible time. The truth that was once locked away in official files is finally being shown to everyone. The question now isn't how Davey Allison died, but why it took more than 30 years for the real story to come out. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, no name was more important in NASCAR than Davey Allison. He was born into racing royalty as the son of Bobby Allison, one of the sport's most respected champions. But Davey was never happy just riding on his family's fame. He earned his own success through talent, hard work, and courage. Fans saw him as a connection between the old days and the new future. He was young enough to welcome new ideas, but old school enough to race with real bravery. Every win he got felt personal to his fans. His victory at Talladega in 1987 made him a serious competitor. And his performance at the 1992 Daytona 500 made him a superstar. He had the charm of a movie hero and the heart of a Southern racer who loved hearing the crowd cheer. To many people, he was the face of NASCAR's new generation. But under all the fame was a man carrying heavy expectations. Sponsors, fans, and family all looked to him to keep the Allison family name strong. When he wasn't racing, Davey found peace in flying. Flying was his way to escape and control something in his life that fame couldn't touch. He got his pilot's license and bought a Bell 206 helicopter so he could travel quickly between home, racetracks, and family. Friends said flying gave him freedom. He often said it made him feel more alive than even racing did. But his love of flying would soon become part of a tragedy. By the summer of 1993, Davey was at the top of his career, but he was also pushing himself harder than ever before. His schedule was packed with no breaks and no mercy. On July 12th, he took control of his helicopter one last time, thinking it would be just another short flight to the track that always felt like home to him. It was a clear, hot afternoon in Alabama. Davey Allison got into his helicopter next to Red Farmer, an old friend and racing legend. The short flight from his hometown to Talladega was one Davey had done many times before. He had plans to meet Neil Bonnett's son for a practice session. Nothing unusual for a Monday, but within just a few minutes, the normal routine would turn into a disaster. At 3:37 in the afternoon, the Bell 206 helicopter got close to the landing pad at Talladega Superspeedway. People who watched said it looked like a normal landing until the last few seconds. Without any warning, the helicopter tilted sharply backward, then rolled to the right side. It fell nearly 30 feet and hit the ground with terrible force. The spinning blade broke into pieces when it hit. Red Farmer was badly hurt but still awake. Davey Allison was not. Emergency workers got there within moments. Farmer was confused and bleeding, and he told the rescuers that something went wrong with the controls. Davey was flown by air to Birmingham Hospital, but the doctors couldn't save his life. He died early the next morning from massive injuries to his head. He was 32 years old. The loss shocked everyone in NASCAR. Just 1 year before, Davey had been competing for the Winston Cup Championship. Now he was gone, leaving behind his wife, his children, and a sad community that had watched him grow from a young rookie into one of the sport's brightest stars. For many people, the crash didn't make any sense. The weather was good and stable. Davey was known as a careful pilot. Farmer, who lived through it, said they hadn't been acting reckless. Something else had gone wrong, something sudden that couldn't be controlled. In the days after the crash, investigators talked to dozens of people who saw what happened. Some said they saw the helicopter spinning before it hit the ground. Others said it dropped straight down like the engine had stopped working. There were even different reports about whether dangerous wind played a part. Mechanics who got there first said they smelled fuel but didn't see any fire, which was strange for such a violent crash. The FAA's first report said it was possibly a pilot mistake during the landing approach. But people who knew Davey didn't believe that at all. He was known for being careful, not careless. Red Farmer, once he got better in the hospital, gave a statement that went against the official story. He said the helicopter had suddenly pitched and spun to the right without warning. He added that it felt like the tail quit holding. That one sentence became the main point of quiet questions for many decades. An experienced pilot hearing those words would immediately think of tail rotor failure, which means a mechanical loss of control, not human mistake. But the final report only briefly mentioned Farmer's story, calling the cause hard to determine and likely pilot control error. Privately, even some NASCAR insiders had doubts about that explanation. An unproven note found years later in the NTSB files talked about torque instability during hovering and said more testing was advised. The testing never happened. For 30 years, fans accepted the official conclusion, not knowing about the problems buried in old files. But now, with those papers unsealed, the pieces of that day are falling into place. And what they show paint a much different picture than the one recorded in history. To understand the full story of that day, you have to understand who was sitting next to Davey Allison. Red Farmer wasn't just a passenger. He was like family. He was a veteran racer and one of the founding members of the Alabama gang. Red had been a mentor and close friend to both Davey and Bobby Allison for many decades. He was tough, skilled, and trusted by everyone. The two men had flown together many times before this. Davey thought Red was one of the safest people he could share a cockpit with. Farmer had been flying for many years, but that day he wasn't in control of the helicopter. Davey was the pilot, guiding them toward the landing pad at Talladega. Farmer said later that the flight had been normal until the final approach to land. The helicopter turned right violently, then tipped backward. Farmer felt like he was floating before the machine slammed into the ground. He blacked out for a moment, but woke up in pain and confusion. He would carry those memories for the rest of his life, and the guilt too. Many people unfairly blamed him at first, thinking he had been controlling the helicopter. He wasn't. And even though he survived, he never stopped thinking about the moment that took his friend's life. Over the years, Farmer gave very few interviews, but when he did, what he said was always the same. He said it happened too fast for anyone to react, and that it just snapped on them. He said quietly that there was no time to do anything. Recently opened FAA interview records confirmed that Red Farmer's earliest hospital interviews included technical details that were ignored in the official report. He described the tail rotor suddenly losing power, saying it was like the tail quit holding. That phrase shows up multiple times across pages of investigator notes. It is now believed that this description matches the conditions of a mechanical linkage failure or torque control breakdown. Both of these could send a Bell 206 helicopter into a spin that can't be controlled within just seconds. Farmer's story, once treated as just guessing, now reads like an exact diagnosis from the only man who lived to tell what happened. When investigators reopened the case filed decades later, they found problems that had been easy to miss back in 1993. The Bell 206 B-3 helicopter had a reputation for being reliable, but repair records from the week before the crash showed small but important notes. There were mentions of stiffness in the pedals and difficulty during torque checks. Those details, listed as within acceptable limits, were never checked again. Modern aviation experts reviewing the papers pointed out possible rotor mass fatigue and linkage were in the tail rotor system. Under certain conditions, especially during hovering turns, these could produce exactly the symptoms described by Red Farmer: sudden yaw, uncontrolled spin, and catastrophic roll. In simpler words, the pilot would lose tail control instantly, leaving no time to fix it. Further examination of part diagrams showed that the gust lock mechanism, a safety device meant to secure the rotor blades when parked, might have been partially turned on. If this is true, it would have made the control inputs restricted, which is a deadly combination with the gusty heat currents often present at Talladega in summer. Engineers reviewing the unsealed file said directly that if this analysis is correct, the pilot never had a chance to save the helicopter. The newly uncovered repair letters include a handwritten note from a mechanic dated just 3 days before the crash. It said that the tail linkage was due for a recheck soon and to monitor vibration. That recheck never happened. The helicopter was cleared to fly anyway. For 30 years, that mistake sat hidden in the files, dismissed as just routine. Only now, under fresh review, do those words reveal how serious they were. The accident was not a simple loss of control. It was a chain of missed warnings, subtle mechanical wearing down, and human trust that ended in tragedy. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't in the machine, but in the air itself. July in Alabama is known for sudden updrafts, which are columns of rising heat that can twist and shake small aircraft without warning. Weather data from that day shows rapid temperature changes and strong heat columns crossing the infield at Talladega between 3:30 and 3:40 in the afternoon, which was the exact time of Davey's final descent. Experts now believe those gusts could have combined with a broken tail rotor to create an impossible situation. The helicopter, already fighting mechanical imbalance, may have hit a crosswind strong enough to flip its nose upward while the tail lost stability. In that moment, even the most experienced pilot would have been helpless to do anything. Aviation analysts, reviewing the release tower data, noted wind shear recorded at nearly 90 degrees to the helicopter's approach path. That kind of side gust could have produced sudden torque stress across the rotor system, just as described in the new NTSB edition. The findings conclude that weather was not the only cause, but a deciding factor that made an underlying failure worse. The combination of mechanical fatigue, incomplete maintenance, and unpredictable heat currents was catastrophic. For years, the incident had been labeled pilot error in the name of keeping things simple. Now it appears the truth was far more tragic. Davey Allison was not at fault. He was a victim of perfect bad luck, struck down by forces that no amount of skill could overcome. The skies that day looked calm from the ground, but above Talladega, invisible turbulence was waiting, just one violent gust away from changing NASCAR history forever. The declassified materials tell the story that officials once tried to make simple. The new NTSB edition, dated decades after the original crash report, includes a detailed breakdown of what investigators now call a partial tail rotor authority loss. It explains that under full torque, the Bell 200 SIXS tail rotor linkage could suffer from a momentary control delay if the mechanical bushings were worn or not properly lubricated. When combined with an unexpected crosswind, the aircraft could yaw sharply and roll before the pilot could counter it. Another revelation appears in NASCAR's own internal safety memo from that same year, an unsigned draft marked confidential. It states that the helicopter's pre-flight inspection log was never checked by a second technician, a procedure that had been standard for team-owned aircraft. The new analysis concludes that no alcohol, drugs, or reckless flying were involved. It clears both men of doing anything wrong. Instead, it points to a tragic alignment of mechanical wear and weather. The edition even references letters between NASCAR executives and FAA inspectors debating whether to tell the public about the design concern.